A shepherd of service, a champion of compassion, the people's pope.
His leadership, for his strength of leadership and his tenderness.
Today we pause to pray for the Holy Father.
Santa Maria, Mater Dei.
A pope of firsts, the first Latin American pontiff, the first Jesuit leader of the Catholic Church, and the first to call himself Francis.
Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera.
We are looking back at the Francis effect, a pontificate that touched the peripheries and changed the world, one heart at a time. Right now on Currents News, the legacy of Pope Francis. A blessing for the body of the Holy Father as hundreds of thousands said goodbye to Pope Francis. Hi, I'm Christine Persichetti. It was a mass befitting the Bishop of Rome, a simple service under a clear blue Roman sky with more than 250,000 mourners filling St. Peter's Square. That was the Holy Father's final wish, to be remembered as a devout follower of Christ among the people he served until his final breath. A final send-off for Pope Francis. More than 250,000 people descended on the Vatican to pay their respects to the pontiff.
He's just different, really humble, loved the poor people.
He was always ready to give a voice to the voiceless. I feel very lucky to be here.
The funeral held in St. Peter's Square, the same place where the Holy Father made his last public appearance just 6 days earlier. Before his death, Pope Francis simplified the papal funeral. He was placed in a simple wooden coffin, not the traditional 3 nesting coffins. During the Mass, prayers were spoken in several different languages, reflecting the Catholic Church's international nature and the backgrounds of those present. Among those in attendance were delegations from over 130 nations, including the United States. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania paid their respects.
Nella quale Papa Francesco tante volte ha celebrato l'Eucaristia.
During his homily, the dean of the College of Cardinals, Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, who presided over the funeral mass, described Pope Francis as a pope among the people. Born the son of Italian immigrants in Buenos Aires in 1936, Jorge Bergoglio was a chemist before joining the priesthood and a teacher of literature and psychology. As the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he was known as a champion of the poor, and after being elected pope in 2013, a reformer. The first pope from the Americas and the first to take the name Francis after St. Francis of Assisi, dubbed the poor man of Assisi. Caring for the marginalized, those living on the peripheries, became the backbone of Pope Francis's pontificate. Thousands of people gathered outside the Vatican while Pope Francis's body was taken to the Basilica of St. Mary Major for burial. It's one of the first places he visited after being elected pope.
Domani voglio andare a pregare la Madonna perché custodisca a tutta Roma.
The pontiff showed his devotion to the Blessed Mother at this papal basilica more than 100 times, praying before the Salus Populi Romani icon, which means the salvation of the Roman people. He stopped there every time he left the Eternal City. On this day, the Holy Father was greeted by some of the people he advocated for during his papacy, the poor, migrants, and prisoners, among others.
Because we want to show our love for our Pope, Pope Francis. This is the only way that we can show to him our love and our prayer in the last moment that she will be, even though she is not with us now, but in heaven he is always watching us and guiding us.
Around 150,000 people lined the Pope's route from St. Peter's Square to the Basilica of St. Mary Major. And since the Holy Father's burial at the Marian Church, thousands have visited his final resting place. The Pope's tomb is simple, featuring his name in Latin, Franciscus, with a light highlighting the cross above. A white rose was also placed on the tomb, a symbol of the late pontiff's bond with the French saint, Saint Therese of Lisieux. The Pope was buried in a small niche on the left side aisle of St. Mary Major between the Pauline Chapel and the Sforza Chapel. He's next to that image of the Salus Populi Romani, which Pope Francis had long visited even before his election as the successor of St. Peter. Ahead of the Pope's funeral, the Diocese of Brooklyn gathered together to mourn the Holy Father during a Mass. Those attending the service at St. Bartholomew's Church in Elmhurst say their lives were touched by the late pontiff. Currents News' Katie Vasquez has that story.
The pews were filled with mourning parishioners at St. Bartholomew Church in Elmhurst on Friday night. Bishop Robert Brennan, who led the Mass of Repose for Pope Francis in the Diocese of Brooklyn, says the diverse congregation represented a grieving universal church.
One of the things that's so beautiful about this part of the diocese here in Queens is, in a sense, the whole world is here. The whole world is here.
Bishop Brennan highlighted how the Holy Father was a light for Catholics across the globe to follow, even to his last breath.
Thinking about him on Easter Sunday morning, he was a pilgrim of hope right to the bitter end. He was a pilgrim of hope right to that encounter with the risen Lord Jesus.
But the Pope had already inspired many in St. Bartholomew's pews, like Crescentia Silliban, who is part of the Diocese of Brooklyn's Indonesian apostolate.
He inspired me to love the poor, and that to accept everybody. Okay, so and then to taking care for creation.
17-year-old Priscilla Lozano says Pope Francis is all she's ever known, and he's been a role model for the young Catholic.
I obviously would have loved to see more of him. I mean, I was really young when he came into his papacy, but to me, he's kind of like who everybody would strive to be.
The Hennews prayed for the late pontiff while remembering their special encounter with him in Rome with their son, Father Christopher Hennew, the rector of the co-cathedral of St. Joseph.
As he was going by, Father Christopher said his parents was here, and he went. Then he stopped and he spoke for a minute. Gave us a blessing.
The 50th anniversary.
No matter how the Holy Father touched their lives, the Brooklyn shepherd said his flock was honoring the Pope in exactly the way he would have wanted.
He said, please pray for me, don't forget to pray for me, and that's what we did. We came together more than any other night. We came together to pray for him.
And the faithful plan to continue those prayers as many churches around the diocese will hold their own Mass of Repose, including one for the youth on April 30th in Elmhurst. Katie Vasquez, Currents News.
Bishop Robert Brennan said some of his most unforgettable moments about the Holy Father include his blessing to the world during the pandemic and Pope Francis's trip to New York. It was during that journey that the Holy Father touched the heart of a sick young girl. Julia Brzezi's life was forever changed in 2015 by a fleeting moment with the Holy Father at JFK. Currents News' Jessica Easthope brings us the story from Bath Beach.
21-year-old Julia Brzezi hasn't taken a step in almost 10 years. But Julia would say she's taken many to make sure no one else suffers the way she has.
Countless doctors that I went to in the beginning of this, because of that misdiagnosis, I'm in a wheelchair today.
Before Julia was diagnosed with Lyme disease in 2015, her father and main caregiver, Enrico, saw his healthy, active daughter fade away. Doctors told him Julia was faking it.
I was always falling asleep in class. I wasn't able to see the board anymore.
She's blue in color. She's losing her hair. And the doctor tells me she may be embellishing a bit.
The last decade of Julia's life has been spent in a wheelchair, lobbying before Congress, advocating for funding, research, and for doctors to take symptoms of chronic Lyme disease seriously.
It's become my mission to raise awareness about Lyme disease and advocate for people because there are millions of people right now suffering with chronic Lyme disease.
And I intend to keep going until I can honestly say that I have tried everything for her. May this only happen to us. And that's what I always ask God when I pray to him, nobody else.
Julia feels her platform was given to her early on in her disease by Pope Francis. She met him fresh off the papal plane on the tarmac at JFK the summer of her diagnosis. She thought if anyone could help her walk again, it was him.
I did feel so close to God in that moment. I didn't get up and walk, but he brought me so many different miracles.
Now a junior at Long Island University, Julia is on track to becoming a doctor. She still hopes to walk again.
And I used to ask God, why is this happening to me? I thought I did everything right. The perspective I did not have before, that I was naive to before. Why not me? Why, this happened to me for a reason.
Julia has yet to get the miracle she asked Pope Francis for.
So I'm going to put these away.
But she says today with confidence she's gotten more. In Bath Beach, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
You could read more about Julia's story and hear her experience with Pope Francis written in her own words in a collector's issue of the tablet. Her testimony is part of a heartfelt tribute to the Pope of the Peripheries. The edition captures the profound impact of the humble Jesuit that reshaped the Catholic Church with compassion, humility, and a vision for a more inclusive world. This is more than just a newspaper. It's a keepsake honoring a pontiff who lived for the people. You can also get future editions sent straight to you by subscribing online to thetablet.org. Pope Francis's final blessing for Easter 2025 was one filled with hope. He did not deliver the traditional Urbi et Orbi himself. Instead, it was read for him. Here is part of what he wrote and his last message to the world. On this day, I would like all of us to hope anew and revive our trust in others, including those who are different than ourselves or who come from distant lands, bringing unfamiliar customs, ways of life, and ideas. For all of us are children of God. While Pope Francis may be gone, he still lives on in the hearts of Catholics around the world, especially those who were lucky enough to see the pontiff in person. The effect of the Holy Father's journey to the Big Apple can still be felt today. Right now, we take you back and remember those moments with Pope Francis. When Pope Francis arrived at JFK Airport in 2015, he was greeted by student musicians from Xaverian High School. The Diocese of Brooklyn on hand to welcome the Holy Father as he embarked on his Big Apple visit. His first stop, St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan for Vespers with priests and religious. Pope Francis was applauded when he gave thanks to the nuns and religious women in the U.S.
¿Qué sería de la iglesia sin ustedes? Mujeres fuertes, luchadoras, con ese espíritu de coraje que las pone en la primera línea del anuncio del Evangelio.
The following day was a busy one for the Holy Father. He started at the United Nations, becoming the fourth pope to speak before the UN General Assembly, reminding world leaders of the basic human rights everyone deserves.
Vivienda propia, trabajo digno y debidamente remunerado, alimentación adecuada y agua potable, libertad religiosa y más en general, libertad de espíritu y educación.
The Pope then participated in an interreligious gathering at Ground Zero. Although he was in a place of pain and suffering, he recalled the heroism of the first responders on 9/11 while speaking about the better aspects of humanity.
Aquí en medio del dolor lacerante, podemos palpar la capacidad de bondad heroica
the capacity
de
of
la que es
heroic
capaz también el
goodness
ser humano.
that the human being is also capable of, the hidden force that we must always appeal to.
He received a rock star's welcome from children at Our Lady Queen of Angels School in East Harlem, where he met with immigrants who receive help from Catholic charities.
Aunque sé que no siempre es fácil tener que trasladarse y encontrar una nueva casa, encontrar nuevos vecinos, amigos. No es fácil, pero hay que empezar.
The last stop in New York for the Pope, Mass at Madison Square Garden. Pope Francis reminded the thousands who took part in the celebration that God is always present amid the chaos of the city and asked them not to overlook the foreigners, the poor, and the elderly.
Y se convierten en parte de un paisaje urbano que lentamente se va naturalizando ante nuestros ojos y especialmente en nuestro corazón.
The Holy Father affected many lives during his journeys abroad. While Pope Francis isn't the most traveled pontiff of all time, that honor goes to St. John Paul II. His passport is no less impressive for a man who held the seat of St. Peter for more than a decade. Pope Francis made 47 international trips, clocking in more than 291,000 miles. His longest trip was actually his last, when the Holy Father went to 4 countries in the Asia-Pacific region in September of last year. On that 12-day journey alone, the Pope logged more than 20,000 miles. But one of the pontiff's most iconic moments happened when the world was forced indoors. In March of 2020, everything shut down. Thousands were dying by the day as medical personnel tried to figure out the deadly virus that was quickly spreading. But amid the chaos was Pope Francis, bringing the light of Christ to the people of God. It was a stunning sight, Pope Francis walking through an empty St. Peter's Square. It was March 27, 2020, just 2 weeks after the coronavirus was declared a global pandemic, when the Holy Father made history at the Vatican, giving an Urbi et Orbi blessing while standing alone in this iconic square as the faithful took part virtually. This blessing is usually reserved for special occasions like Easter, Christmas, and the election of a new pope. But an exception was made on this day as Pope Francis led an extraordinary moment of prayer, praying for an end to the coronavirus.
Abbiamo proseguito imperterriti, pensando di rimanere sempre sani in un mondo malato. Ora, mentre stiamo in mare agitato, ti imploriamo, svegliati, Signore.
The stunning gesture from the Pope during a time of uncertainty and fear across the globe was a way for the Holy Father to connect with the faithful spiritually, despite the quarantine, church closures, and lack of sacraments. Pope Francis closely watched as the pandemic developed. Italy was one of the countries hardest hit, with nearly 1,000 deaths every day. Just days before this special blessing, an Italian priest living in the same guest house that Pope Francis called home tested positive for the virus. During daily masses, the Pope prayed for people living in fear.
Preghiamo oggi per tanta gente che non riesce a reagire e rimane spaventata per questa pandemia. Che il Signore li aiuti a alzarsi, a reagire per il bene di tutta la società, di tutta la comunità.
And each day he would pray for a different group, from the sick to those caring for them, journalists covering the pandemic, and people living on the streets.
Preghiamo oggi per coloro che sono senza fissa dimora in questo momento dove ci chiede di essere dentro casa.
But the Pope didn't just offer prayers during the pandemic, he jumped into action. He sent desperately needed ventilators to hospitals in Italy and set up an emergency fund to help those suffering from the pandemic. The Holy Father was the first to contribute, making a $750,000 donation. Pope Francis also encouraged the faithful to get the vaccine, calling it an ethical duty. And he led by example, as both he and Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI were vaccinated. The Pope even took part in a video campaign urging people to protect themselves as an act of love for others.
Vacunarse es un modo sencillo pero profundo de promover el bien común y de cuidarnos unos a otros, especialmente los más vulnerables. Le pido a Dios para que cada uno pueda aportar su pequeño grano de arena.
More than 11 million people tuned in to watch the papal prayer during the pandemic. Coming up on this special edition of Currents News, these kids traveled to Rome to get closer to Christ. Instead, they got to witness papal history.
As the Holy Father offered his final blessing on Easter Sunday, a group of Brooklyn students were in the crowd. I'm Katie Vasquez, and I'll have their story coming up.
Plus, we remember the People's Pope through some of his most memorable encounters with young people. The pilgrims from the Diocese of Brooklyn look back at World Youth Day with Pope Francis. A group of Brooklyn kids now have a very special connection to Pope Francis. The students at St. Stanislaus Kostka Catholic Academy in Greenpoint were in Rome for the Easter services. The trip was meant to help them celebrate Christ's resurrection. Instead, the students joined thousands in prayer for the late Pope. Currents News' Katie Vasquez has that story.
It was quickly becoming the trip of a lifetime for the students at St. Stanislaus Kostka Catholic Academy in Greenpoint, the young Catholics celebrating the Jubilee year in Rome.
We went through all the holy doors. We saw a piece of the wood from Jesus' manger, which was really, really cool.
Tutto il male del mondo.
Attending Easter Sunday Mass at the Vatican, and then receiving a blessing from Pope Francis.
Moment of peace because someone so important like the Pope, who's so close to God, was there with us. It's very beautiful as a Catholic.
They considered themselves lucky getting the chance to see the Holy Father up close.
Got the view of a lifetime because he was there and obviously trying to wave and acknowledge.
Little did they know that one day later, that moment in St. Peter's Square would hold so much more meaning.
There was bells, church bells going off, there was cannons going off, so I mean, you knew this was enormous. You could hear it all throughout Rome.
The Pope died.
The young Catholics learned the Pope had died that Easter Monday morning. In their grief, they decided to stop and pray.
And we all huddled together and listened to the bells, and we're praying Hail Marys for him and just paying our respects.
Their trip to Rome, now a tribute to the Holy Father. They waited 4 hours at St. Peter's Basilica just to see Pope Francis and say goodbye.
You saw him laying there in state, and knowing that you saw him 2 days before was very powerful.
While they are saddened at the loss of the Holy Father, they are happy to have one lasting memory with the late pontiff.
It was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I feel it's gonna make me a better Catholic. Our whole group was really lucky because we got to see him on one of his last days of life. And I knew that he went straight to heaven because he was such a great Pope.
It was an Easter Sunday these kids know they'll never forget. In Greenpoint, Katie Vasquez, Currents News.
The Holy Father loved spending time with young people, especially while traveling. Throughout his papacy, the Diocese of Brooklyn has sent some of the largest groups to World Youth Days all over the globe. Currents News' Jessica Easthope tells us how the Holy Father's presence changed some young lives.
His presence alone was moving.
We just saw the Pope. We can't stop crying. We just saw the Pope.
And his words inspiring.
You are not here by accident. The Lord has called you, not only in these days, but from the very beginning of your days.
Pope Francis shaped the Church of today, impacting generations of young Catholics, vowing to bring inclusion and grace to an institution that welcomes all to witness Christ.
The Holy Father's message was a reminder that this church is for everyone, that the Lord calls you despite your weakness, that the Lord calls you despite your own fears and doubts.
During his papacy, Pope Francis attended 4 World Youth Days, 2013 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 2016 in Krakow, Poland, 2019 in Panama, and most recently, 2023 in Lisbon, Portugal.
Hola from Portugal.
Where scores of pilgrims from the Diocese of Brooklyn, led by Bishop Robert Brennan, braved the summer heat, their hearts on fire with the love of Christ and the passion of a community with purpose.
It's worth everything just to see the look on their faces. People don't always remember all the things that is said at an event like this, but they remember that they were this close to the Holy Father.
In Lisbon, Pope Francis told the crowd that God is calling each of them by name, that he knows their uniqueness and embraces it. A message of hope for young people who historically have strayed from the church.
I've heard so many people say like, oh, like you feel like a presence of God when you see the Pope, but like, it actually was pretty crazy.
But that year, Pope Francis drew 1.5 million of them in, solidifying his legacy as the people's Pope.
Just to see him and to be with him this weekend and to pray with him is such a gift.
Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
And that is this special edition of Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. In honor of Pope Francis, we leave you with these happy moments from the Holy Father's 12 years as Pope.